Hello, thank you for joining me once again. I am reading a book of breathing, about breathing, and it's called The Hindu Yogi Science of Breath. It's by Yogi Ramacharaka. Relax with Yoga by author Liebers, 2 books in one for a complete yoga practice. This is what it looks like, and it's all about breathing, and it explains the body, and so on and so forth. So we are on chapter 4 on page 17. Okay? The esoteric theory of breath. The science of breath, like many other teachings, has its esoteric or inner phase, as well as its esoteric or external. The physiological phase may be termed the outer or esoteric side of the subject, and the phase which we will now consider may be termed its esoteric or inner side. Occultists in all ages and lands have always taught, usually secretly to a few followers, that there was to be found in the air a substance or principle from which all activity, vitality, and life was derived. They differed in their terms and names for this force, as well as in details of the theory. But the main principle is to be found in all occult teachings and philosophies, and has for centuries formed a portion of the teachings of the Oriental yogis. In order to avoid misconceptions arising from the various theories regarding this great principle, which theories are usually attached to some name giving the principle, we, in this work, will speak of the principle as prana. This word being the Sanskrit term meaning absolute energy. Many occult authorities teach that the principle, which the Hindus term prana, is the universal principle of energy or force, and that all energy or force is derived from that principle, or rather is a particular form of manifestation of that principle. These theories do not concern us in the consideration of the subject matter of this work, and we will therefore confine ourselves to an understanding of prana as the principle of energy exhibited in all living things, which distinguishes them from a lifeless thing. We may consider it as the active principle of life, vital force, if you please. It is found in all forms of life, from the amoeba to man, from the most elementary form of plant life to the highest form of animal life. Prana is all-pervading. It is found in all things having life, and as the occult philosophy teaches, that life is in all things, in every atom, the apparent lifelessness of some things being only a lesser degree of manifestation. We may understand their teachings that prana is everywhere, in everything. Prana must not be confounded with the ego, that bit of divine spirit in every soul, around which clusters matter and energy. Prana is merely a form of energy used by the ego in its material manifestation. When the ego leaves the body, the prana, being no longer under its control, responds only to the orders of the individual atoms or groups of the atoms forming the body, and as the body disintegrates and is resolved to its original elements, each atom takes with it sufficient prana to enable it to form new combinations. The unused prana returning to the great universal storehouse from which it came. With the ego in control, cohesion exists, and the atoms are held together by the will of the ego. Prana is the name by which we designate a universal principle, which principle is the essence of all motion. Force or energy, whether manifested in gravitation, electricity, the revolution of the planets, and all forms of life from the highest to the lowest. It may be called the soul of the force and energy in all other forms, and that principle which operating in a certain way causes that form of activity which accompanies life. This great principle is in all forms of matter, and yet it is not matter. It is in the air, but it is not the air nor one of its chemical constituents. Animal and plant life breathe it in with the air, and yet if the air contained it not, they would die, and even though they might be filled with air, it is taken up by the system along with the oxygen, and yet is not oxygen. The Hebrew writer of the book of Genesis knew the difference between the atmospheric air and the mysterious and potent principle contained within it. He speaks of Nishimit, Ruach Chayim, did my best, which translated means the breath of the spirit of life. In Hebrew, Nishimet means the ordinary breath of atmospheric air, and Chayim means life or lives, while the word Ruach means the spirit of life, which occultists claim is the same principle which we speak of as prana. Prana is the atmospheric air, but it is also elsewhere, and it penetrates where the air cannot reach. The oxygen in the air plays an important part in sustaining animal life, and the carbon plays a similar part with plant life. But prana has its own distinct part to play in the manifestation of life aside from the physiological functions. We are constantly inhaling the air charged with prana and are as consistently extracting the latter from the air and it's appropriating it to our uses. Prana is found in its freest state in the atmospheric air, which when fresh is fairly charged with it, and we draw it to us more easily from the air than from any other source. In ordinary breathing, we absorb and extract a normal supply of prana, but by controlled and regulated breathing, generally known as yogi breathing, we are enabled to extract a greater supply, which is stored away in the brain and nerve centers to be used when necessary. We may store away prana, just as the storage batteries stores away electricity. The main powers attributed to advanced occultists is due largely to their knowledge of this fact and their intelligent uses of this stored up energy. The yogis know that by certain forms of breathing, they establish certain relations with the supply of prana and may draw on the same for what they require. Not only do they strengthen all parts of their body in this way, but the brain itself may receive increased energy from the same source, and latent faculties be developed and psychic powers attained. One who has mastered the science of storing away prana, either consciously or unconsciously, often radiates vitality and strength, which is felt by those coming in contact with them. And such a person may impart this strength to others and give them increased vitality and health. What is called magnetic healing is performed in this way, although many practitioners are not aware of the source of their power. Western scientists have dimly aware of this great principle with which the air is charged, but finding that they could find no chemical trace of it or make it register and on any of their instruments, they have greatly treated the Oriental theory with disdain. They could not explain this principle and so denied it. They seem, however, to recognize that the air in certain places possesses a greater amount of something, and sick people are directed by their physicians to seek such places in hopes of regaining lost health. The oxygen in the air is appropriated by the blood and is made use of by the circulatory system. The prana in the air is appropriated by the nervous system and is used in its work. And as the oxygenated blood is carried to all parts of the system, building up and replenishing, so is the prana carried to all parts of the nervous system, adding strength and vitality. If we think of prana as being the active principle of what we call vitality, we will be able to form a much clearer idea of what an important part it plays in our lives. Just as in the oxygen in our blood used up by the wants of the system, so the supply of prana taken up by the nervous system is exhausted by our thinking, willing, acting, etc. And in consequence, constant replenishing is necessary. Every thought, every act, every effort of the will, every motion of a muscle uses up a certain amount of what we call nerve force, which is really a form of prana. To move a muscle, the brain sends out an impulse over the nerves, and the muscle contracts, and so much prana is expended. When it is remembered that the greater portion of prana acquired by man comes to him from the air inhaled, the importance of proper breathing is readily understood. Chapter 5, the nervous system. It will be noticed that the Western scientific theories regarding the breath confine themselves to the effects of the absorption of oxygen and its use through the circulatory system, while the yogi theory also takes into consideration the absorption of prana and its manifestation through the channels of the nervous system. Before proceeding further, it may be as well to take a hasty glance at the nervous system. The nervous system of man is divided into two great systems, viz., the cerebrospinal system and the sympathetic system. The cerebrospinal system consists of all that part of the nervous system contained within the cranial cavity and the spinal canal, viz. The brain and the spinal cord together with the nerves which branch off from the same. This system presides over the functions of animal life known as volition, sensation, etc. The sympathetic system includes all that part of the nervous system located principally in the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities, and which is distributed to the internal organs. It has control over the involuntary processes such as growth, nutrition, etc. The cerebral spinal system attends to all the seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, feeling, etc. It sets things in motion. It is used by the ego to think, to manifest, to consciousness. It is the instrument with which the ego communicates with the outside world. This system may be linked to a telephone system. This system may be likened to a telephone system with the brain as the central office and the spinal column and the nerves as cable and wires respectively. The brain is a great mass of nerve tissue and consists of three parts, viz. The cerebrum or brain proper, which occupies the upper front, middle, and back portions of the skull. The cerebellum or little brain, which fills the lower and back portions of the skull, and the medulla oblongata, which is the broadened commencement of the spinal cord lying before and in front of the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the organ of that part of the mind which manifests itself in intellectual action. The cerebellum regulates the movements of the voluntary muscles. The medulla oblongata is the upper enlarged end of the spinal cord, and from it and the cerebrum branch forth the cranial nerves, which reach to various parts of the head, to the organs of the special sense, and to some of the thoracic and abdominal organs, and to the organs of respiration. The spinal cord or spinal marrow fills the spinal canal in the vertebral column or backbone. It is a long mass of nerve tissues branching off at the several vertebrae to nerves commuting with all parts of the body. The spinal cord is like a large telephone cable, and the emerging nerves are like the private wires connecting there within. The sympathetic nerve system consists of a double chain of ganglia on the side of the spinal column and scattered ganglia in the head, neck, chest, and abdomen. A ganglia is a mass of nervous matter, including nerve cells. These ganglia are connected with each other by filaments and are also connected with the cerebral spinal system by motor and sensory nerves. From these ganglia, numerous fibers branch out to the organs of the body, blood vessels, etc. At various points, the nerves meet together and form what is known as plexuses. The sympathetic system practically controls the involuntary processes such as circulation, respiration, and digestion. Excuse me. The power or force transmitted from the brain to all parts of the body, means of the nerves, is known to the Western science as nerve force, although the yogi knows it to be a manifestation of prana. In character and rapidity, it resembles the electric current. It will be seen that without this nerve force, the heart cannot beat, the blood cannot circulate, the lungs cannot breathe, the various organs cannot function. In fact, the machinery of the body comes to stop without it. Nay, more, even the brain cannot think without prana be present. When these facts are considered, the importance of the absorption of prana must be evident to all, and the science of breath assumes an importance even greater than that accorded to by Western science. The yogi teachers go further than does Western science in one important feature of the nervous system. We allude to what Western science terms the solar plexus, and which it considers as merely one of a series of certain matted nets of sympathetic nerves with their ganglia found in various parts of the body. Yogi science teaches that this solar plex is really a most important part of the nervous system, and that it is a form of the brain playing one of the principals part in the human economy. Western science seems to be moving gradually towards a recognition of this fact, which has been known to the yogis of the East for centuries. And some recent Western writers have termed the solar plex the abdominal brain. The solar plex is situated in the esophagus region, epigastric region, just back of the pit of the stomach, on either side of the spinal column. It is composed of white and gray brain matter, similar to that composing the other brains of man. It has control of the main internal organs of man and plays a much more important part than is generally recognized. We will not go into the yogi theory regarding the solar plexus further than to say that they know it as the great storehouse. They know it as the great central storehouse of prana. Men have been known to be instantly killed by a severe blow over the solar plexus, and prize fighters recognize in its vulnerability and frequently temporarily paralyze their opponents by a blow over this region. The name solar is well bestowed on this brain, as it radiates strength and energy to all parts of the body, even the upper brains depending largely upon it as a storehouse of prana. Sooner or later, Western science will fully recognize the real function of the solar plexus and will accord it to a far more important place than it now occupies in their textbooks and teachings. Okay, I'm going to stop there. My eyes are tired. And when I pick it back up again, we'll be on chapter 6 on page 24. And I have been reading the Hindu Yogi Science of Breath by Yogi Ramacharaka and Relax with Yoga by author Liebers. It's 2 books in one for a complete yogi practice. This is what it looks like, and I got it off of Amazon. Okay? Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for educating yourself, equipping yourself with something new, because we don't know until we know. Okay? So with better understanding, we are better individuals, right? Sounds good to me. Until next time.